History does become a burden. Life becomes a burden. Being able to possibly see the future becomes a burden. And what Habakkuk sees here is the future of Judah. And why it is so disturbing to me is because there are so many parallels, there are so many similarities to what we are looking at in the world that we face today. And it is a burden. And Habakkuk opens up the first 4 verses in chapter 1. It's a little short book with only 3 chapters. But he opens up by talking about the wickedness of the land. And he talks about everyone has left God. And he basically implores God and he says, how long are you going to let it continue like this? He said the law only works for the unlawful. There are 2 sets of laws. Nobody really has justice. There's not justice in the land. And he just asked God, how long is this going to happen? And how many times can you look at the world that we live in and you think the same thing? God, how long are you going to let this continue? This wickedness, this nefarious, insidious, sinful country that we live in. How long are you going to let before judgment is going to take place? And then in chapter 5, or excuse me, in verse 5 and following, God answers him. And God basically says, I'm going to do something that you won't believe. I'm going to raise up the Chaldeans. In history, we would call them the Babylonians. And he said, I'm going to use the Babylonians to do something that you can't believe. I'm going to use them to judge Judah. And it blows his mind. He basically says, wait a minute. It would today, think about this, it would almost, as we sit here and look at the sin in this country, as we look at the things that need to be corrected in this country, it's almost like God would say, well, I've got plans for y'all. I'm going to use China to judge y'all. But wait a minute, I can get closer than that. I'm not just going to use China. I'm going to use the liberals and the socialists and the Democrats to judge you. That's what he's talking about here. And what's the reaction we would have? God, you can't do that. They're worse than we are. I mean, we somehow believe there should be fair play. Yes, we deserve the judgment of God, but if you get judged, aren't you supposed to be judged by somebody that's better than you? And God's saying, no, you're going to get yours, but I'm going to use somebody that's worse than you are to judge you. And Habakkuk just couldn't stomach it. He basically said, God, you can't do that. You can't use those that are more unrighteous than the righteous to judge the righteous. And we're not righteous. And I think we feel much the same way. We see the sin and the corruption in this country. And if God really told us how judgment was coming, we would probably have as much trouble as Habakkuk did. Say, that's not right, God. You can't do that. It's not fair. It's not fair to use them to judge us because they are worse than we are. They are more wicked than we are. They are more sinful than we are.